Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We've agreed you're no longer part of the family, my mom wrote. Don't come to any gatherings. The words glowed on my screen, cold and final. My sister liked the message within seconds, as if cutting me off was something to celebrate. I sat there for a long time, staring at the text that ended years of loyalty, patience, and quiet giving. Then I smiled, not out of bitterness, but clarity. Thanks for confirming, I typed back. I'll cancel all the auto payments. By 12:03 a.m., the first transfer alert pinged on their phones. The mortgage payment that had quietly been coming from my account stopped. The car insurance autopay halted. The utilities, tuition support, and the streaming services that magically renewed every month, frozen. I didn't send another word. I didn't need to. They'd never known how much I had carried behind the scenes. I'd taken over the house bills when Dad's small business collapsed. I paid my sister's rent through college when she said her boyfriend's startup would cover it. Even Mom's medication plan had been automatically charged to my card. I had never bragged, never demanded gratitude. Family was supposed to be about love, not ledgers. But that message made one thing clear. My place in the family existed only as long as I was useful. At 1:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Wait, what payments? What do you mean cancel? Then another. We didn't realize you were handling that. And finally, from my sister. Can we talk? I turned off my phone and leaned back in bed, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The silence that followed was liberating. For once, I wasn't the fixer, the provider, the invisible safety net. I was just me, and that was enough. By morning, they were calling nonstop, but I didn't answer. Some relationships end loudly, others with a single message, and both can be blessings in disguise. I walked out onto my balcony, the sunrise spilling gold across the sky, and breathed deeply. I had spent my life trying to belong to a family that only valued what I gave. Now, for the first time, I was free to build something new, something real, starting with myself. Because when they said, "You're no longer part of the family," they didn't realize they'd just given me back my power. We've agreed you're no longer part of the family, my mom wrote. Don't come to any gatherings. The words didn't just appear on my phone. They sliced through me like a quiet blade. For a few seconds, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she meant to send it to someone else, or maybe it was one of her emotional outbursts that would later end with an apology. But then I saw the timestamp, the deliberate tone, the lack of hesitation in her words. She meant every letter. A second later, my phone buzzed again. My sister had liked the message, that small blue thumbs up, as if disowning me was a moment worth celebrating. My chest tightened. I'd grown used to being the outsider, the one they blamed when things went wrong, but this was final. It was the kind of message you didn't come back from. I read it over and over, the words blurring slightly. Memories flashed. Birthdays I'd organized, bills I'd paid quietly behind the scenes, holidays I'd spent trying to make everyone feel connected. And now, all of that had dissolved into a single line of text. You're no longer part of the family. My first instinct was to defend myself, to ask why, to remind them of everything I'd done. But as my thumb hovered over the keyboard, a strange calm began to settle in. The kind of calm that comes when something inside you finally stops breaking and starts rebuilding. I realized I didn't need to plead for a place I had already outgrown. The room felt still, the clock ticking, the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen, yet something in me had shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was just done. Then I smiled, not out of bitterness, but with the kind of quiet understanding that comes after years of trying to earn love that was never freely given. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and instead of sending a paragraph of explanations or questions, I typed only a few words. Thanks for confirming. I paused, feeling the weight of each syllable, then added, I'll cancel all the auto payments. It was simple, almost casual, but it carried everything I'd never said. The exhaustion, the realization, the end of my silence. For years, I had been the one who stepped in when no one else did. When Dad's business went under, I quietly started covering the mortgage. When Mom's medical bills piled up, I set up automatic transfers so she wouldn't have to stress. My sister's rent, her tuition, even her car repairs, I handled them all, telling myself it was just what family did. I didn't want them to feel embarrassed or indebted. I thought my help would make us closer. But in the end, it only made me invisible. My efforts became expectations, my kindness mistaken for weakness. They never asked where the money came from. They simply assumed things were being handled. I had become a ghost in my own family, unseen, but always there when needed. So when I hit send on that message, it felt like I had finally stepped out of the shadows. I imagined the ripple that single sentence would cause, not to punish them, but to remind them that I had a presence, a choice, and a line that had just been crossed. By 12:03 a.m., I began canceling one payment after another. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, phone plans, gone. One click at a time, I released myself from every silent obligation that had chained me to people who never once said thank you. It wasn't revenge. It was release. They had no idea how much of their stability had been quietly balanced on my shoulders. Every convenience they took for granted had a story behind it. Mine. When the lights stayed on, even after Dad missed a few payments, it was because I'd transferred money at the last minute to avoid disconnection. When Mom boasted about her perfect credit score, it was because I'd been making her minimum payments in the background for years. Even my sister's hard-earned independence had been a quiet illusion, propped up by deposits I'd made whenever her account dipped too low. I remembered the countless nights I'd stayed awake doing calculations, juggling my own expenses so theirs could stay covered. I'd given up vacations, skipped dinners, and postponed my own dreams because family, to me, meant loyalty. It meant stepping in when no one else could. I thought I was protecting them, but somewhere along the way, I'd only taught them to depend on a version of me that never said no. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They had built a world that functioned because of my invisible effort. Every bill paid on time, every car insured, every comfort maintained was tied to me. They just never saw it. And now, with one text, they'd severed the connection that made all of it possible. It was almost poetic. The same silence I'd once filled with sacrifices was now emptying out before their eyes. The mortgage notice would arrive, the insurance would lapse, the utilities would send warnings, and for the first time, they would realize that my absence wasn't just emotional, it was structural. As I watched the confirmation emails roll in for each canceled payment, I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. They had chosen to remove me, and all I'd done was honor their decision completely. At 1:17 a.m., my phone began to light up with messages, one after another. First came Mom's confused tone. "Wait, what payments? What do you mean cancel?" Then my sister chimed in, her confidence suddenly cracked. "You didn't really mean that, right? We didn't realize you were paying for all that stuff." The irony almost made me laugh. For years, they never once asked where the money came from, never once questioned how everything managed to stay afloat. But now, faced with the reality of my silence, panic started to spread like wildfire through their perfect little routine. I didn't respond. I just sat back, the glow from the phone casting long shadows across my room, and scrolled through their messages. They alternated between confusion, anger, and desperation, emotions that once would have sent me into overdrive trying to fix things. But now, I felt no obligation to cushion them from the consequences of their choices. They had made a clear decision. I wasn't part of the family. So why should I still act like the family's foundation? By 2 a.m., the tone of the messages shifted. The same people who had shut me out were now pleading for conversation. "Can we just talk this out?" My sister wrote, followed by a second message that simply said, "Please." My mother called 3 times in a row before sending one last text. I didn't mean it like that, but she had. They all had. They'd just never expected me to believe them. I set the phone face down and leaned back in my chair. For once, I wasn't trembling, I wasn't doubting, and I wasn't rushing to explain myself. I felt something rare, an almost sacred stillness. I realized that I'd spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never truly mine. And in doing so, I'd forgotten that I had the power to build my own. That night, their panic-filled messages became the soundtrack to my peace. I didn't block them. I didn't delete them. I just let them sit there, unanswered, reminders of a lesson long overdue, that sometimes silence says everything words never could. When morning came, the sunlight spilled through my curtains, warm and quiet, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake up with the weight of someone else's problems pressing on my chest. The phone kept buzzing, Missed calls, unread messages, long voice notes filled with justifications and apologies, but I didn't touch it. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stood by the window, and watched the world move on without the chaos I used to chase. It felt strange, but peaceful, like stepping into a life I had been waiting for without realizing it. I thought about all the years I had spent tying my worth to being needed. Every favor, every payment, every time I dropped everything to fix a crisis that wasn't mine, it had all been my way of trying to prove that I mattered. But love that must be earned through sacrifice isn't love. It's dependence dressed up as affection, and I finally understood that. By noon, the silence between us had settled like dust after a storm. My mother's last message had been, "You've changed." She wasn't wrong. I had changed. I wasn't the same person who begged for acknowledgement or gave until there was nothing left to give. I had learned that boundaries weren't walls. They were doors I could close whenever peace required it. I stepped out onto the balcony, the breeze lifting my hair, and looked at the horizon. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to fix anything or anyone. I was thinking about myself, my own future, my own joy, my own healing. Freedom didn't come with fireworks or fanfare. It came quietly, in the form of choosing myself after years of being chosen last. When they said I was no longer part of the family, they believed they were cutting me off. But the truth was, they had finally set me free. I didn't lose a family that night. I lost a burden disguised as one. And standing there in the golden light of a new day, I knew I'd never go back. Weeks passed, and the silence between us grew into something permanent, but not painful. My life began to bloom in the absence of their chaos. I started investing in myself instead of patching up everyone else's lives. I traveled for the first time in years, laughed without the guilt of leaving someone behind, and rediscovered what peace actually felt like. Every so often, a message would arrive, apologies wrapped in half-truths, attempts to pull me back into the old patterns, but I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but out of understanding. Some distances aren't punishments, they're protection. One evening, I passed by a family having dinner at a small cafe. Their laughter floated into the night, unguarded and genuine. For a moment, I watched them and smiled, not with envy, but with gratitude. I had spent too long trying to belong to the wrong people. Now I was building a life where love didn't have to be purchased, where loyalty didn't have to hurt. My mother's final message had once declared I was no longer part of the family. But standing there beneath that soft streetlight, I realized something beautiful. She had been right. I wasn't part of that family anymore. I was part of something far greater, my own. A family of one, built on self-respect, peace, and the freedom that comes from finally choosing yourself.